The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of KSMQ Public Service Media Incorporated or its assigns.
Welcome to Garden Connections. I'm your host, Stephanie Passingham. I think you'll really enjoy today's show. We've got a couple of great places to visit. We're going to start right here in Wild Again Permaculture Gardens. Leslie Kaup is going to be our host, and she tells us all about the different plants that she has growing in here, and really, what does permaculture mean? We'll also go to Rochester to visit Libby Capel, and she has a fairly small yard, but she really has filled it intensively, so I think you'll really enjoy what she's done with her garden. And of course, Chef Stephen Larson, as always, gives us a great recipe, this time for eggplant salad. I hope you'll stay with us. Garden Connections is coming up next. Well, today we are starting our show at Wild Again Permaculture Gardens, and our special expert today is Leslie Kaup, and she's going to tell us all about permaculture. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thanks for inviting us out to this amazing space.
Sure, you're welcome.
Tell us a little bit, the first time I heard about permaculture garden, permaculture makes me think of, I don't know why, but the tundra. I don't know where that affiliation comes from, but the more I learned about it, the more amazed I was at how intricate it was, how it was weaved in with other things. So help the viewers understand kind of what are the basics of permaculture. What does it mean?
Well, permaculture is the word means permanent agriculture or perennial agriculture. That's the origins of the word. And the definition I like best is that it mimics natural ecosystems. It's designing human habitat and food systems to mimic natural systems.
Okay, and so it's very diverse?
It is very diverse, yes. Okay. So think about any ecosystem in the world, a forest, a savanna, a jungle, and then take those components and mimic them with food-producing plants.
Okay, so it's not necessarily strictly a production garden. It's going to have some things that you can't eat.
Right. Well, you'll notice a lot of flowers in my garden, and those are to attract pollinators. Okay. So you need things like that too.
Sure, so purpose for everything.
Right, exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
Are there some key elements that should be included? Like, for example, in kind of southern Minnesota, northern Iowa, oak savanna is a typical environment.
Right.
Do you try to, are you limited to reproducing what's kind of in your natural area, or can you create permaculture of an area that's not, say, typically Minnesota native, or is that not part of the philosophy?
Well, a lot of the plants I have here are not native. Okay. But I do try to look at what grows here naturally and find similar plants, maybe in the same family. For example, we have the big oaks, right? But most people don't eat acorns. Right. So one thing we've planted, and they're still small, we'll see them, they're only 2 years old, are chestnuts, which are in the same family as oaks, but they have an edible nut. Okay. Another thing that we see are lots of currants and gooseberries in the woods around here. And so we plant things like that, cultivars of those.
Great.
Those are some examples.
Right. It sounds like permaculture gardens really take quite some time to mature. What if someone wanted to even give it a try, what kind of timeline should they give themselves to see something as developed? Like, how long have you been here, for example?
I planted the first plants in 2009. In April of 2009, we planted 100 crowns of asparagus, and that was the first thing that was here. Okay. So,
any particular reason you started with asparagus?
We had it on hand. A friend gave it to us. So
Good reason?
Exactly. It was a gift. And then 2.5 years ago, I put in the fruit trees that you're seeing, and I started with larger trees from a nursery so that I would get faster results. Okay. But it's fifth season. And I'm getting quite a bit of food, but it's still a few years away from full production.
All right. Should a gardener expect to get, we think of, and we featured a number of vegetable gardens where people have rows of particular plants and do their rotations and those kinds of things. Can you expect to be fed by a permaculture garden? How big does it have to be? I mean, your interest in diversity.
Well, you'll notice that there are a lot of annuals here still. Okay. Especially along the edges and the borders where I can reach them easily and plant them easily. Okay. And eventually those will transition into more perennials as I find species that can take those roles
That can
or
work.
that work with that. Yeah.
So constant discovery, it sounds
It
like.
is, yes. I love discovering new plants, and I start a lot of plants from seed, so that I have
you do?
control over it, and
Okay.
it's a lot less expensive that way also.
Great, sounds good. Well, I can't wait to get out into the garden and see some of the examples of things that you've done.
Sure.
We are going to check in with Libby Capel, and she is a gardener in Rochester, Minnesota. She was on the garden tour this summer, and she has a relatively small space, and she's going to show us what she did with that space. So let's check it out, and we'll be back here in just a little bit. We're here in Rochester, and we're visiting another one of the great homes that are on the Rochester Garden and Flower Club tour. And Libby Capel has been gracious enough to give us a sneak peek. She's all gussied up and ready to go for the tour. And Libby, thank you so much for inviting us to your home.
You're welcome, and thank you for coming. I surely enjoy showing my garden.
You have an amazing garden here, and you don't have a ton of space. So we're going to get to some of the tricks that you've used to really pack your garden full of color in a small space. But tell me a little bit about, have you always been a gardener?
I've always been a gardener. It started on the farm, raising belladonna and digitalis during the war. As a small child, we learned how to weed and plant and water. Then I had a family, and I went to vegetables.
Okay, sure.
And after the vegetables, we had a short move for a year and a half in England.
England. Oh, that's a wonderful place to garden.
Their gardens are so small and packed full of the most wonderful colors from every variety of flower you could ever imagine.
They have a great climate for growing flowers, don't they?
They certainly have a knack,
They do.
and a nice moisture comes down about every other day.
That helps as well.
And then I've traveled through the world and been to many, many gardens. Japan is another one that's amazing. A small plot of land with maybe 7 trees and just the size of a normal patio.
So you've gotten lots of inspiration from small spaces that you can utilize here in your townhome.
I think that's what started the project.
Oh, that's great. And so creative. It's full of color. Tell us a little bit about some of the things that you have in your garden.
I love clematis and trellises.
You have some amazing structures, too.
I love my roses. My mother was one of the first 3 rose judges in the whole USA.
Is that right?
2 of her friends from Edgerton, Wisconsin, and my mother, a little farm lady, who knew Latin and everything about the flowers and plants, but never took the time to do them. And from there, that inspired me because she would take me to rose shows that she judged, and she would take me to her friends' gardens. So I had a little bit of inspiration.
You had early exposure, and it sounds like the green thumb runs in the family.
Well, I call it a dirty thumb because
Sure. You like to get your hands dirty.
I do.
That's great.
No gloves is better.
No gloves is better. So the structures that your clematis climb on and that some of your roses climb on, tell us a little bit about some of your favorites, because you seem to have found some unusual pieces.
I love going around to the different garden centers, and if something's unusual, it usually ends up in my car, and somewhere I find a spot.
That sounds great. It really creates a character here in your garden. There are all kinds of whimsical things and just beautiful pieces that are practical as well, you know, like supporting vining plants.
Yes, and another thing I've really truly enjoyed is the statues.
Tell us, which one's your favorite?
My favorite one is a little angel. She is like sitting like this, like, I wonder when Libby's coming out here. I've been sitting here all day and she hasn't appeared. Or sometimes I think, do I have to work again in the garden?
You must be out here every day.
Every day.
Every day.
4 to 6 hours, easily.
Wow, every day. So you have tons of color, and I understand you have more than 80 pots
80
that you
pots.
put out, which allows you to kind of change from year to year. How do you determine what you're going to put in all those
Well,
pots?
that's a mystery. I come home with the trunk load after trunk load, and then I'm thinking, help, what do I do with this and what do I do with that? But somehow it all just goes.
It all just goes. Now your patio here is spick and span. Where do you do all your dirt work?
Right out on the lawn.
On the lawn, okay, that makes
I
sense.
have my cart from the country, and without that red cart, I could do nothing.
All right, so you get to work and you pot up all those things. You've got some really amazing things. You have a beautiful hibiscus,
Right.
That's right behind us in a gorgeous pot, and it's blooming perfectly for today.
It cooperated.
Very accommodating.
Everything
Great.
was just amazing today.
One of the interesting things I saw is you have some beautiful pine trees in your backyard, and I understand you don't care for pine trees boughs lying on the grass. Tell us what you do to keep them up off the grass.
All right, when I was in Japan, they save every limb of every tree, and they support it no matter what it looks like with a 2x2. So I took 2x2s and I bought some pipe and pounded the pipe into the ground, put the 2x2 there, drilled a hole, and with a big nail, I put the nail through the hole into the wood and through into the pipe. And then another one, and it supports the branches
And
up.
it holds the
So
branches up.
that is a tip I found in Japan.
That's great, and makes a nice edge for your lawn. You do have some room in the back for a little grass.
I begged, borrowed, and stole. And pine trees are one of my favorites. They're not so messy as raking leaves. And the park had some messy property down there, so I just started planting pine trees.
Pine trees instead.
And
And
mowing,
they look
and now it's a nice little forest.
Yep,
And
that's
so
nice.
the birds love the habitat.
It really looks great. You have a ton of roses off your back patio, and you've got pots. You've got some beautiful water features. Water is a favorite of many gardeners.
I think that really attracts the birds.
Oh, sure. Sure, it brings in the wildlife, and it sounds good too.
It does. It's very relaxing and cool.
You have quite a few things planted along your side yard. Most people either decorate their front yard or work with their backyard, but you have really utilized the side yard well. Tell us about some of the things that you have planted along the side of your townhouse.
Well, I like to create depth and height. So I think by putting the trellises there and then something out, and I have freestanding trellises, which I've learned to cut pipe and put over the trellis bottoms to hold them upright, I have created some depth to keep them away from the structure, and also many statues and little plants along the way.
So a variety, a mix of perennials and annuals, right?
And there are some shrubs,
And some shrubs in there as well, right?
a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
That keeps all the textures and the colors so very interesting. Do you have any, I mean, other than your many years of experience, do you have any training in landscape design? I mean, you really have an eye for it.
I'm kind of like embarrassed, but I think by my traveling to all these wonderful countries and seeing their exposures and how they garden, and plus our own country, the ideas kind of like click upstairs, and then I come home with this or that. I don't know what I'm doing or where it's going, but somehow it has a little spot already waiting.
It's got a place waiting for it. When you pull up to your place, you have a very inviting front door. Again, relatively small space, but full of structure. You've got a bench out front. You've got plants out front. It's so colorful. Tell us where you got your ideas for some of the projects out in the front entryway that welcomes people into your home.
Well, I like to have a little bit of a trellis, and I have some statues and lots of pots that I can exchange places for and create. And a water fountain, a little boy getting a drink out of a bubbler. And one of the fun features out there is my little pig. He only is sitting on his hind haunches. And I remember when I was 10, I had to stay home on the farm.
Okay.
But my older brother and younger sister went to Canada.
Oh,
So Daddy, I think, was feeling sorry for me one day. So he says, "Here, Libby, here's a little pig that got stepped on by the mother, and its back is apparently broken." And it was sitting on his haunches.
okay.
So he said, "You can put it on the back porch," which was really special because Mother was gone. And he says, "There is a bottle up in the cupboard by the sink, and put some milk in it and fix some newspaper in a box." So all of a sudden I just started working with that pig. And I think that's what created the nurse in me
Oh, and was that your profession then?
later on in life.
In life it
But
was.
I worked with the hind legs of the pig and tried to strengthen them and show him how to stand up every day. And about 6 weeks later, he was standing and he began to take steps. And then my daddy came along and he says, "Well, I think he's happier out with the rest of his friends." Little did I know what the next step was.
Right.
To
Well, all
market.
your hard work paid off for him, but certainly you have a nurturing spirit. You can see that by all of the beautiful garden things that you have here, because I imagine it takes quite a bit of care to keep them looking so nice.
It does, and it's watered 2 or 3 times a day, but that gives me the opportunity to be out here.
Okay.
And the dog walkers come by and friends that would like to see the garden, and then I come back and there's a different bird, and it's just like,
Sure.
I never stop looking around. And then all of a sudden this flower just opened, like the hibiscus. In the early morning they're shut, and about 2 hours later I come back and they're just popped open.
Popped
It's
open and they look
amazing.
beautiful. You really learn a lot just by being in your garden, don't you?
I do.
Yeah.
It's a learning experience.
What kind of advice? You have so many years of experience at being a gardener from both on the farm and in different parts of the world. What's your best piece of advice to someone who may be just starting out as a gardener?
Be creative. Be unique. Don't try to copy somebody else's work. An artist swings the pencil and pen and paper a different way, and you can do it too. Just try to create and arrange what you see in your head. And you can always change it, but lots of times it's the right way.
That's great. Well, I've really enjoyed seeing your garden here today. You have a wonderful place. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you,
for having us
Stephanie.
out.
And I just really enjoyed the interview and the opportunity to show my creativity.
It's been great. You can tell you have a lot of it.
Thank you very much.
Stay tuned for more Garden Connections. We're back at Wild Again Permaculture Gardens, and Leslie is showing us around some of the different plants that she has. Now, what's this interesting looking thing? It almost looks like it's going to seed.
It is. It's actually a mustard plant that's gone to seed.
Okay.
And the bees really love the flowers on brassicas, on mustards and broccolis and things, so I let them go to seed.
Okay,
for the
cool.
bees.
And I see right underneath there,
There's a beautiful squash.
Big, beautiful squash. That's great. All right, and this is a great spot. I love all the great examples that you have here. So let's start with this one here on your right.
This is comfrey. It's a plant that a lot of permaculture folk use as a mulch crop. So you can, so you can chop it down several times a year and mulch with the leaves, and they break down rather quickly.
Okay.
It also has a very deep taproot, and so they call it a dynamic accumulator. It reaches down and pulls minerals from deep in the earth, and then makes those available to the plants that don't have as deep of roots.
Great, and kind of loosens the soil too? Does it do that as well? Do you move this around, or is this always its spot?
This is a perennial. It's always right here. Sometimes I'll take chunks out and move it somewhere else.
Okay, so it can be divided?
It can, yes, very easily.
Okay, so you've got some other great things in here. You've got an herb.
Yep, this is lemon balm. It's good for teas.
Love that smell.
And it's also a really nice ground cover, so it keeps the weeds down.
Okay.
And this is amaranth. It's a grain crop from South America, and the birds love it.
Can humans eat it?
Yes, the leaves are edible in salads.
Oh, really?
And the seeds are also edible. They're very tiny, and this one's not going to seed yet. Oh, there's a couple little tiny seeds. And I've been threshing these plants and collecting the seed to make for grain.
So is it like you'd eat it like a porridge, like an oatmeal?
Yep, you can do that. Yep.
Okay.
Or grind it and use it as a flour for like pancakes.
You also have a lovely vine growing up there, so you have some beautiful grapes.
Yeah, that's Marquette. It's a variety developed by the University of Minnesota as a wine grape. And this is the first good year on it, so I'm pretty excited about those.
They look great.
They do.
All right. Well, let's check out a few more things.
Sure.
Leslie, one of the things I love about this garden is you're walking along this beautiful path and there's a carrot and you can pick one, or there's some chard that you can pick, and I just love how it's all interwoven into the landscape.
Yes. Really. In a food forest like this, it's often more like foraging, like in the woods, than it is like picking and harvesting in a garden.
In a garden.
Yes, which I really enjoy. It's very satisfying.
Great. Well, we've stopped in an area, and I'm going to have you tell us about these wonderful things too, but we are right next to your chicken and duck coop area.
Yes, we are.
Are animals necessarily part of a permaculture landscape?
I think a successful permaculture landscape, yes. Okay. Yes, they eat a lot of bugs. They eat the excess produce and weeds. They provide me with eggs and meat, so they're very valuable.
So a great
in the system.
combination to what you're doing out here.
And they're also creating compost.
Sure.
Sure.
Yes. So it brings the nutrients back into the garden.
Correct. Right.
Great.
Right.
So you have these big, beautiful, leafy things that at first glance I thought was cauliflower, and you told me it is actually
collard greens.
Collard greens.
Right.
What do you do with collard greens?
My favorite thing to do is saute them with bacon and a little bit of lemon and onions and eat them like that.
That sounds
they're
great.
excellent.
That sounds great. Can you also, a lot of people like those green juices for breakfast. Can you use collards?
I believe so. I never have, but I'm sure you could.
Okay. Yep. Another good option, because I think you're supposed to rotate those through your system. So spinach and try collard greens.
Right.
You have some peppers here in this space as well.
There's a few little peppers right here.
So you're growing a lot of traditional things that people would have in their gardens. You're just incorporating it into the landscape rather than in single rows.
Yeah, I find that if you have plants, a more diverse mix of plants, then the pests can't find them. they get confused. So if there's a collard next to a pepper next to an eggplant, they can't. The thing that likes the collards isn't just going to be able to eat its way along the row.
Right,
It
right.
helps a lot.
You'll have to do a little searching to find the next one.
Exactly.
Speaking of eggplant, you have a beautiful one hiding in there.
Sure, yeah. We have a large specimen here. We've already picked a few off of this plant, but this is another couple pounds that we'll be enjoying soon.
That is fantastic. Just gorgeous. And what a great segue. Chef Stephen Larson has got a recipe for us today for eggplant salad. I'm sure he would love to take advantage of that beautiful fruit. So let's see what he has in store for us.
Hi, I'm Chef Stephen Larson. Welcome to my kitchen in Quarter Quarter Restaurant in Harmony, Minnesota. Today's recipe is going to use eggplant. Now I'm using a standard sort of variety here, Black Beauty, but you can certainly use any other purple variety of eggplant for this dish, Chinese long eggplant or even the small Thai purple eggplant. So the first thing that we need to do is get this cut up, and the best way to do that is just to take that bare end off so that we get the leaf end, and then we'll just nip a bit of the flower end as well and take that off. Now since we're going to be grilling this, I want to make sure that the slices are relatively thick so they hold up well to the grilling. So we're going to go for about 3/4 of an inch to an inch. All right, and we're going to lay those out on our pan over here. And we're going to combine that with some zucchini, some sweet onion, and tomato. But we also need to make a marinade for this, which is kind of a dressing marinade combination. So we have the olive oil in the bowl. We're going to add some red wine vinegar to that. Nice shot of salt and freshly ground pepper. And we need some garlic. And we want that nice and finely minced. Okay, so that was 1 large clove. And then I've got a couple of tablespoons of fresh oregano leaves here, and I'm going to mince those down so we have about a tablespoon minced. Again, we want these relatively finely minced so that it spreads evenly throughout the dressing. And then we can just use a spoon to mix that up. And we'll top our onions and zucchini. And then we will move to the grill. Now, obviously I'm using my restaurant's char grill here, but you can certainly do this on an outdoor grill or even on a grill pan in your kitchen. So I want to put these marinade side down. We'll give them a few minutes and then turn them to cook them the rest of the way through. Now, one of the things, of course, that makes a dish Greek is to add some feta to it. So we're going to do that. We have some nice blocks of feta here, about 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch thick. We're going to put just a little drizzle of extra virgin olive oil on there. We'll spread that around a touch. And we're going to use a hot non-stick skillet to get some browning on the outside of this. Okay, so while the feta is browning, we're going to cut up our other vegetables while we keep an eye on that. So these we're just going to cut into a large dice and into the bowl they go. Okay, we're going to let the cheese rest for just a couple of seconds while we finish the salad. So we have our diced vegetables. We're going to add a couple of cups of diced tomato and the rest of that marinade slash dressing. Then we can cut the cheese and put that in there. And as a final finish, a sprinkling of slivered pitted Kalamata olives. Greek style grilled eggplant and vegetable salad, because there's nothing better than eating fresh from the garden.
Well, Leslie, you have an amazing place here. I just love how everything is interwoven, and you've really given us a great definition of what permaculture is. And if someone wanted to get started in permaculture garden, is there a really great resource that you would direct them to?
You know, there's a forum on the internet called permies.com, Permies.com.
Okay.
And it's just a huge forum where people can talk to each other and learn more.
All right.
I think that's probably the best.
And if they really get into it, they can be like you and become certified, take the
Absolutely.
actual course,
Yep.
and get certified as well.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you so
Thank
much
you so
for
much.
inviting us
You're
out,
welcome.
and we really learned a ton today.
Great, I'm glad to hear that.
And thank you for watching this edition of Garden Connections. I hope you'll join us again next time. I'm your host, Stephanie Passingham.